They say what's taken in secret always finds its way back to the light. And in our small town, secrets have long shadows. She wasn't supposed to be part of my story, but she forced her way in. With her charm, her lies, and her hunger for what wasn't hers. She wanted my man, my life, my peace. And for a while, it looked like she had it all. But what she didn't know is that every stolen thing carries a curse. And when her perfect world began to crumble, she realized too late that not every victory is worth the price. Because sometimes, losing him isn't the punishment, it's the beginning. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the Revenge by Sophia channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel. The story begins in the golden calm of an early autumn morning. The narrator, Lena, describes how her life once felt like a warm, steady rhythm. Soft laughter in the kitchen, the smell of coffee brewing, her boyfriend, Evan, humming while scrolling through his phone. The world felt safe then, small and kind. They lived in a modest apartment with pale curtains that danced with the wind. Lena believed happiness was something you could build brick by brick, as long as love stayed pure. But even in that peace, she sometimes caught a shadow, a whisper of something fragile beneath their laughter. A phone turned face down, a message left unanswered. She brushed it off. Everyone has secrets, she told herself. Yet that morning, when she found a faint trace of perfume on his jacket, one that wasn't hers, the stillness cracked. And for the first time, she wondered if peace could ever be trusted. The first time Emily visited, it felt innocent, like any friend stopping by for a chat. She was radiant, all bright smiles and laughter that filled the room too easily. She'd known Evan for years, or so she said, though Lena didn't remember hearing much about her before. She'd bring wine, sit close, tell stories that made Evan laugh in that deep, warm way that used to belong only to Lena. At first, Lena told herself not to be jealous. Emily was friendly, too friendly maybe, but she was also charming, and pretending to trust her felt easier than confronting her. But little moments began to stand out, a touch on his arm that lingered too long, a look exchanged when they thought she wasn't watching. The air around them grew heavier, like a storm waiting for its first drop of rain. And then one night, as Emily hugged Evan goodbye, Lena saw his hand rest on her back, slow, familiar. It was only a second, but it was enough. Days turned colder after that. Conversations between Lena and Evan grew shorter, filled with quiet spaces that used to hold warmth. He began staying late at work, claiming deadlines, while Emily's name slipped into their lives more and more, through messages, calls, laughter from another room. Lena tried to fight the thoughts clawing at her mind. She cooked his favorite meals, asked about his day, smiled even when it felt forced. But love cannot survive on pretending. One evening, she caught Evan staring into his phone with that half-smile she hadn't seen in months. When she softly asked who he was talking to, he just said, "No one important." That lie, so small, so casual, was the moment everything began to change. And in the silence that followed, Lena realized the warmth in their home wasn't fading. It was being stolen. It began so quietly, Lena almost didn't notice. Emily started showing up more often, sometimes with coffee for Evan, sometimes just passing by. She laughed easily, made herself at home, and soon, her voice became a familiar sound in their living room. One afternoon, Lena came home to find Emily already there, barefoot, sitting on the couch, scrolling through a playlist Evan had made years ago for her. "Hope you don't mind," Emily said, her smile sweet and sharp at the same time. "Evan said you wouldn't." Lena just nodded, though her chest tightened. It wasn't what Emily did, it was how she did it. Like she was testing how far she could step before Lena pushed back. And that day, for the first time, Lena realized Emily wasn't visiting their home. She was entering it. Weeks passed, and Emily's presence began to blend into their routine like a ghost wearing Lena's skin. A new scent filled the apartment, her perfume, floral and heavy. The playlist changed. The framed photo of Lena and Evan was quietly moved from the mantel to a corner shelf. Evan didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. At dinner one night, Emily mentioned a trip she and Evan took years ago. She laughed, eyes locked on him, saying, "You were such a terrible driver then." He chuckled, remembering, while Lena's fork froze midair. Then, she didn't know they'd ever been close enough for trips. Later that night, Lena whispered, "You've been distant lately." Evan sighed, tired. "You're imagining things." But she wasn't. Every laugh between him and Emily felt like another brick pulled from the wall holding her world together. And still, she said nothing, because sometimes silence feels safer than the truth. It was raining the night Lena finally saw what she wasn't supposed to. The soft patter against the windows masked the low murmur of voices in the kitchen. She'd come home early from work, earlier than either of them expected. Through the half-open door, she saw them standing close, too close, their laughter blending with the sound of rain. Emily's hand brushed Evan's arm. He didn't move away. For a moment, Lena just stood there, the world blurring around her. The sound of the clock ticking grew louder than the storm. When she finally stepped into the room, both of them turned, startled, guilty. "Oh, Lena, we were just—" Emily began, but the words dissolved under Lena's quiet stare. Something broke in that silence. Not a scream, not a fight, just the fragile sound of trust shattering into dust. And deep inside, Lena knew the door she'd opened could never be closed again. Lena noticed how the air changed. Every word between them felt staged, rehearsed. Emily's visits became quieter, more secretive. Evan started locking his phone, lowering his voice during calls, and saying he needed space. One night, Lena heard soft laughter coming from the balcony. She peeked through the curtain. Evan was there, whispering into his phone, smiling like he used to smile at her. "Can't talk now," he said softly. "She's still awake." The words cut deeper than a scream ever could. When he walked back inside, pretending nothing happened, Lena didn't confront him. She just smiled faintly and said, "Did work call again?" He nodded, avoiding her eyes. And that was the moment she knew. The man standing in front of her wasn't hers anymore. Days blurred together after that. Emily's presence lingered even when she wasn't there. A perfume scent on Evan's clothes, a lipstick mark on a mug that wasn't Lena's, a laugh echoing in his phone. He began spinning stories that didn't fit together. Meetings that ran too late, errands that took too long, receipts from places he swore he hadn't been. One evening, Lena sat beside him on the couch, scrolling through his messages while he showered. Her hands trembled as she read words that made her stomach twist. "I can't wait to see you again." She doesn't suspect anything. The name above the chat burned into her eyes, Emily. The water stopped running. His footsteps echoed closer. Lena locked the screen and placed the phone back down, perfectly where it was. She looked calm when he entered, but her heart was pounding like thunder. He smiled, kissed her forehead, and she let him, even though she now knew what he really tasted like: betrayal. That night, Lena stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection under the flickering light. Her eyes looked different, harder, older. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who believed love could survive anything. That girl was gone now, replaced by someone colder, quieter, stronger. When Evan came in, she asked softly, "Do you still love me?" He hesitated, a second too long. "Of course I do." But lies have a sound, and she heard it clearly this time. She smiled faintly, touching his face. "Then why do I feel like I'm losing you?" He looked away. And in that silence, she understood. She wasn't losing him. He was already gone. She didn't cry that night. She just stared at her reflection, wondering when love had turned into something so unrecognizable. And for the first time, she began to think about what revenge might look like. It was a Sunday evening, quiet, heavy, the kind of silence that sits on your chest. Lena had made dinner. His favorite pasta, candles lit, soft music playing. She wanted the night to feel normal, though her heart already knew it wouldn't be. When Evan arrived, he seemed distracted. Phone buzzing every few minutes, eyes darting toward the screen. Finally, she said it. "Who is she?" His fork froze midair. "What are you talking about?" Lena's voice didn't shake. "Don't lie to me, Evan. I saw the messages. For a long moment he said nothing. The air between them thickened, full of truth and fear. Then he whispered almost too quietly, "It's not what you think." But it always is. And as he looked away, she realized his silence said everything words never could. Hours later, when the storm outside broke, so did he. He sat on the edge of their bed, hands trembling, and said her name, Emily. Just hearing it from his mouth made Lena's stomach twist. "It just happened," he muttered. "We didn't mean to. I was confused." Confused. That was the word he chose to describe the months of lies, the nights of laughter behind her back, the woman who had smiled in her face while stealing her world. Lena didn't scream. She just stared at him, her eyes calm, her voice steady. "You loved her, didn't you?" He didn't answer. That silence was worse than any confession. The rain tapped against the window like faint applause for a tragedy that had finally reached its climax. And in that moment, Lena realized something terrifying. Heartbreak doesn't sound like crying. It sounds like nothing at all. By morning, the apartment felt like an echo chamber. She packed slowly, not out of weakness, but out of finality. Every folded shirt, every box closed, was a piece of her reclaiming what was left. Evan tried to speak, but his words stumbled out like broken glass. "We can fix this," he said. "It doesn't have to end." But it already had. She looked at him one last time. Not with love, not with hate, but with a quiet knowing. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "Not because you lost me, but because of what you found instead." And as she walked out the door, Emily's name still hung between them like smoke. The sound of the door closing was soft, but in that silence, something darker began to stir. Because sometimes, walking away isn't the end of a story. It's the beginning of revenge. Emily thought she had it all. She moved into Evan's life like she'd always belonged there, her clothes in his drawers, her perfume in his car, her laughter echoing through the same apartment that once held Lena's tears. To everyone else, they looked happy, the perfect couple reborn from another woman's ruin. On social media, their smiles looked effortless. She posted pictures of candlelit dinners, his arm around her, captions that read, "Finally found my forever." But forever has a way of slipping through fingers that aren't clean. Because when she scrolled through the comments, she saw names, old friends of Lena's, whispering between the lines. Words like karma, too soon, be careful what you wish for. She laughed it off. But somewhere inside, a quiet unease began to grow, the kind that keeps you awake long after the lights go out. The honeymoon phase didn't last long. Evan started changing again, late nights, distant eyes, tired excuses. Emily tried to hold on tighter, believing love could fix the guilt festering between them. But guilt has a scent, and she could smell it on him like smoke. One evening, while cooking dinner, she asked softly, "Do you ever miss her?" Evan froze. "Lena?" Emily nodded. The silence that followed was heavy. Too long, too honest. Finally, he muttered, "She didn't deserve what happened." The knife slipped from Emily's hand and clattered onto the floor. Her pulse roared in her ears. That night, when she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw it, not victory, not love, but the shadow of the woman she destroyed staring back at her. Lena didn't reach out. She didn't need to. Her presence began to return in whispers, mutual friends mentioning her name, stories of how well she was doing, how calm she looked, how much she'd changed. "She seems happy," someone told Evan at a party. He smiled politely, but his eyes gave him away. Emily noticed. She noticed the way his expression softened at the mention of Lena, the way he went quiet when her name hung in the air. She tried to laugh it off, to kiss him harder, to remind him of what they had, but every kiss felt colder than the last. And when she scrolled through Lena's page one night, saw her smiling, confident, alive, something inside Emily cracked. Because it hit her then, she hadn't taken Lena's life. She'd only borrowed it. And sooner or later, life always wants its pieces back. At first, it was small things most people wouldn't notice. Evan stopped answering texts as quickly. His smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. He came home late, smelling of rain and distance. The apartment felt colder now, quieter. Even Emily's laughter, once bright and loud, sounded hollow, like an echo that couldn't find its way back. One night, she woke to an empty bed. Evan was on the balcony, staring out at the dark city. "Can't sleep," she whispered. He didn't turn around. "Just thinking." "About her?" she asked before she could stop herself. The silence that followed was so long, she wished she hadn't spoken. Behind him, the curtains swayed gently, and for a moment, in their reflection, she swore she saw another woman's shadow standing beside him. Emily tried to keep control. New dresses, fresh makeup, fake smiles. But no matter what she did, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. At work, people whispered when she entered the room. Friends stopped calling. Even her parents avoided the topic when she mentioned Evan. The world had turned against her. Or maybe, she thought, it was just showing her what she'd become. One afternoon, she overheard two coworkers talking near the break room. "She's the one who stole her friend's boyfriend," one whispered. "Yeah," the other replied. "They say he's cheating on her now, too." Emily froze, coffee burning in her hands. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, it was pitying. And somehow, that pity hurt worse than hate. Evan grew restless, the same way he'd once grown restless with Lena. He stopped touching Emily. He avoided her eyes. His phone buzzed late at night again, and though she tried not to look, curiosity is a poison she couldn't resist. When she finally checked, her hands trembled. There were messages, flirty, secretive, from another woman. "Evan," she whispered, her voice cracking as she held up the screen. He looked at her, unbothered. "What did you expect?" The words hit her harder than any scream. She realized then that she had built her happiness on someone else's heartbreak, and now that same heartbreak had come home to her. That night, alone in the dark, she thought she heard laughter echoing in the hallway, soft, familiar, almost like Lena's. And for the first time, she was truly afraid. Months passed before Emily saw Lena again. It happened by accident, or maybe fate decided it was time. Emily was at a cafe, sitting alone, stirring her untouched coffee. The door chimed and there she was, Lena. Confident. Composed. The same woman Emily had broken, now standing taller than before. Her hair glowed in the afternoon light, her smile effortless, untouched by bitterness. For a moment, Emily couldn't move. She watched as Lena ordered, laughed with the barista, and sat by the window. No sadness. No anger. Just peace. Evan had never made her look like that. Lena's eyes lifted once, meeting Emily's. Just a glance, calm and knowing, before turning back to her drink. No words were spoken. None were needed. But that one look said everything. And it terrified Emily more than any confrontation ever could. From that day, Lena was everywhere, not physically, but in whispers, photos, passing mentions. People spoke kindly of her now. "She's doing great," they'd say. "She's really found herself again." Emily smiled politely when she heard it, but inside, jealousy burned like acid. Evan noticed too. He started talking about Lena again, subtly, cautiously. "She's changed a lot," he'd say. "She seems happy." Emily's heart tightened every time he said her name. One night, she snapped. "Do you still love her?" Evan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence spoke for him. That night, Emily dreamed of Lena standing in their hallway, whispering, "You can have him." But when she looked closer, Lena wasn't smiling. She was watching. And when Emily woke up, she wasn't sure if the whisper had been a dream at all. Emily began to unravel again, but differently this time. It wasn't rage or guilt. It was dread. Her reflection fell off, like her eyes didn't belong to her anymore. Calls went unanswered. Friends drifted away. And everywhere she went, it seemed someone mentioned Lena, not as a victim anymore, but as a woman reborn. One afternoon, she found a letter slipped under her door. No name, no address, just a single line written in careful, delicate handwriting. "Everything you take comes back around." Her hands trembled. She looked around the empty hallway, heart racing. She called Evan, no answer. She opened the window. The street was empty. But in the distance, through the glass reflection, she thought she saw someone standing across the road, still, quiet, watching. The letter slipped from her fingers, because she knew that silhouette, and it was smiling. Emily woke one morning to an emptiness she couldn't explain. Evan was gone. Not a note, not a word, just silence where love had once lived. Her phone rang endlessly, but each call ended with voicemail. Friends stopped responding. Even her social media, once full of likes and comments, felt dead. She scrolled through pictures of herself and Evan, now haunting reminders of what she'd lost. Panic began to claw at her chest. She tried to call him again, but the line went dead. Suddenly, every memory of her victory felt like a trap she had willingly walked into. And in the quiet apartment, she realized she was completely, terrifyingly alone. Somewhere in the shadows, Lena's presence lingered, not with words, not with confrontation, but in the suffocating calm of inevitability. Days passed. Emily tried to rebuild her life, but every step felt wrong. At work, gossip swirled like smoke around her. Friends whispered about betrayal, about karma catching up. Every message she received seemed to hint at judgment, a tone of pity or quiet scorn. Late one night, she found a package on her doorstep. Inside, a framed photograph of Lena and Evan laughing together, a moment from long ago, before Emily had stolen it all. Attached was a single note. "You can't erase what was never yours." Her hands shook. The weight of all she had taken, all she had destroyed, pressed down on her chest like a stone. And in that silence, she realized the most terrifying truth. It wasn't just Evan she had lost. It was herself. Emily looked in the mirror that night and barely recognized the face staring back. Her eyes were hollow, her lips tight with unshed tears. Every lie she had told, every betrayal she had committed, stared back at her from that reflection. She thought about how far she had fallen, how she had stolen, manipulated, and destroyed without seeing the cost until it was too late. She whispered into the dark, I didn't mean to lose everything." But the apartment didn't answer. And somewhere, faint but undeniable, she felt it. The quiet presence of Lena, a ghost of all that had been taken, now calm and untouchable. The downfall was complete. And Emily understood, finally, that the life she had stolen wasn't hers to claim. It started quietly, almost like a whisper. Emily heard footsteps outside her apartment, soft, deliberate. She looked through the peephole. No one. But when she turned around, there was a letter on the floor, sealed carefully. Inside, it wasn't angry words or threats, just truth. Names, dates, moments she thought were hidden forever. Every lie she had told, every betrayal she had committed, was laid bare. She read it again. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't revenge from Lena, it was exposure. Her friends, colleagues, even Evan had seen everything in some way, now reflected back to her. The world she built on lies had cracked wide open, and the truth glinted like broken glass. She realized in that moment, there was no running. There was no fixing. Only facing what she had become. Emily tried to respond, to explain, to justify, to plead. But her words fell flat. People who had once admired her avoided her gaze. Evan ignored her entirely, walking past without a backward glance. Every step she took felt heavier, each breath colder. The laughter and warmth she had once enjoyed turned against her, replaced by stares of pity and judgment. Late one night, she stared out the window, watching the city glow under the moonlight. She thought of Lena, calm, strong, untouchable, and a wave of terror rose in her chest. Not fear of revenge. Fear of reality. Fear of herself. Because now Emily knew what she had truly lost, not just love, not just friends, not just status, but her very self. In the final quiet hours, Emily sat alone, surrounded by reminders of her own mistakes. Photographs, messages, gifts she'd once treasured. Every object became a mirror reflecting her deceit. She whispered into the dark. I thought I could have it all. But the dark didn't answer. Only silence. Only reflection. Only the weight of consequences she could never undo. And far away, somewhere she could not see, Lena lived free of the shadows that had once haunted her.
Calm. Complete.
Victorious in the way only the truly patient can be. Emily realized then that the reckoning had never been about Evan. It had always been about herself. And in that truth, sharp, bitter, inescapable, she finally understood the full cost of her choices. Lena walked through her life, now, with quiet confidence. The apartment she once shared with Evan was gone, replaced by a new space filled with light, calm, and her own laughter. She thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the lies, the nights of quiet heartbreak. Each memory was a scar, but one she wore like armor. She realized something profound. Love, when true, cannot be taken by force. It either grows or it fades. And no one could steal her worth. Not Emily, not Evan, not anyone. Sometimes, the past returned in whispers, in reminders of loss. But Lena no longer flinched. She could face it because she had survived it. And somewhere deep inside, a small, satisfied part of her smiled, quietly, powerfully. The streets she walked were filled with the echoes of her past, fleeting, silent shadows of mistakes and heartbreak. She thought of Emily, alone and haunted by the consequences of her own choices. No words could reach her now. No apologies would matter. Life had corrected itself in its own quiet way. Lena understood something about people. The ones who steal and deceive are always fragile. They live in fear of the moment the truth finds them. Emily had been clever, bold, even charming. But cleverness cannot outrun morality forever. And boldness cannot erase the damage done. The lesson was clear. Patience, strength, and quiet resilience always outlast pride and deceit. Lena paused on a bridge one evening, watching the city lights shimmer across the river. Everything she had lost had taught her more than anything she had gained. Pain, heartbreak, betrayal. All of it had forged her into someone untouchable. She whispered into the wind, not to anyone, not for anyone. You cannot steal what is meant to be yours. And you cannot ruin what has grown strong in truth. And as the water reflected the moonlight, calm and endless, she realized something hauntingly beautiful. Revenge does not always roar. Sometimes it waits quietly. And sometimes it smiles, knowing the world has already delivered justice. The story was over. But the echoes of it would linger, quietly, in the hearts of those who had forgotten what truth really costs. They say revenge is sweet. But I've learned it's quieter than that. It doesn't always come in grand gestures or cruel payback. Sometimes, it comes in silence. In the peace of knowing you survived something meant to destroy you. She stole my man, yes, but in doing so, she lost herself. She traded truth for illusion, love for control, and ended up with neither. I didn't have to lift a finger. Life has its own way of balancing the scales. And when I see her now, passing by like a ghost of who she used to be, I don't feel anger anymore. Just distance. Because the best revenge is living a life she can't touch.